A year later, life looked completely different. Carmen gave birth to twins, a healthy boy and a beautiful little girl. Everyone said the boy looked like me while the girl was the image of her mother. Outside the delivery room, Aaron paced back and forth with a huge bouquet of flowers, looking even more nervous than I was. He insisted it was because he had officially promoted himself to godfather. When the nurse finally came out and told me that both Carmen and the babies were safe, the tension I'd been carrying all day disappeared so suddenly my legs almost gave out. Inside the room, Carmen looked exhausted, her hair damp with sweat, but the smile on her face was brighter than anything else in the room. She quietly introduced me to our son and daughter as if they were the greatest gifts in the world. They were tiny, wrinkled, and honestly not very cute, but I couldn't stop staring at them. Before I realized it, tears were running down my face. Aaron shouted from outside asking if I was crying, and I blamed the hospital air conditioning, which only earned me a weak slap on the head from Carmen and a smile that said she wasn't buying it. I kissed her hand instead of arguing. Later, I heard how things ended for Jason and Oriana. Jason's company eventually collapsed, not because of anything I did, but because he tried forging customs documents to solve his financial problems. He was caught and placed under investigation for commercial fraud. Oriana gave birth, but they couldn't even afford baby formula, forcing her mother to sell one of the family's apartments to pay the hospital bills. At some point, Oriana posted a short message online that simply read, "If I could do it over again." I never saw it. I was too busy at home changing diapers. Our son somehow managed to pee all over my hand while his sister laughed beside him. Carmen sat on the couch drinking red date soup and recording my complete lack of diaper-changing skills. She teased me mercilessly, saying the future heir to the Chan medical empire had been defeated by 2-month-old babies. Before I could stop her, she posted the photo online with exactly that caption. Sunlight poured through the apartment, tiny baby clothes swayed on the balcony, and my phone buzzed with a message from Aaron announcing he had already turned the picture into a meme. I threatened to replace his company's supplier, and he immediately surrendered. Carmen walked over carrying our daughter, who had wrapped her tiny fingers around a strand of her mother's hair. Looking at me with those familiar crescent-shaped eyes, she softly said, "Thank you." I laughed and asked what for. She smiled and answered, "For getting cheated on. Otherwise, how would I have ever found you?" I stood there holding my son, listening to our children making sleepy little noises, and realized she was right. Getting betrayed once had felt like the worst thing that could happen to me. Looking back, it turned out to be the best investment I had ever made. Later, old Joe texted me, joking that my romantic rival had come to visit and asking if I wanted to meet him. I replied, "No, let him wait." When he asked how long, I answered, "Until his wife gives birth." He responded with nothing more than a thumbs-up emoji. Around the same time, Valentina came to the hospital carrying 2 boxes of mooncakes. She wasn't there to argue this time. Her eyes were red, and she quietly begged me to help Oriana because Jason's business was falling apart, and they were struggling to pay for the upcoming delivery. I looked at her and couldn't help remembering how she had accused Carmen of stealing me only a few months earlier. Calmly, I told her that Oriana was carrying Jason's child, so if Jason had financial problems, Jason was the one who needed to solve them. Valentina insisted that Oriana deeply regretted everything and knew she had hurt me more than anyone. I stopped her gently and said, "Her regret belongs to her. It isn't my responsibility." She lowered her head, gripping the mooncake boxes with trembling hands. Before walking away, I reminded her there were only 3 days left before the deadline to return my bride price. I turned around and walked back into the hospital while a muffled sob echoed behind me. I didn't stop. It wasn't because I was heartless. I had simply learned the difference between kindness and foolishness. Giving sympathy to someone who created their own mess doesn't help anyone. That evening, Carmen came over and cooked dinner for me. She made braised ribs, sweet and sour cabbage, and tomato egg soup. The ribs were too salty, the cabbage was still a little crunchy, but the soup turned out pretty well. She watched me expectantly and asked how it tasted. I smiled and told her her cooking reminded me of a first-day surgical intern walking into an operating room. She immediately tapped my bowl with her spoon and threatened to throw everything away if I wasn't going to eat it. I laughed, grabbed another rib, and finished 3 bowls of rice anyway. She sat across from me with her chin resting on one hand, quietly watching me eat. Then she asked if I had seen Oriana's mother that day. When I asked how she knew, she admitted Aaron had told her. Of course he had. She asked what Valentina wanted, and I told her she had come asking me to help Oriana financially. Carmen asked if I had agreed. I simply said no. She nodded without questioning my decision, walked behind my chair, and gently rested her hands on my shoulders. Her touch was careful, almost as if she was afraid I might break. "You did the right thing," she whispered. I reached up, held her hands, and noticed how cold they were from washing the dishes. I rubbed them between my palms, and she let me. Outside, the full moon shone through the curtains, casting a soft line of light across the floor that connected our shadows together. The day before the deadline for returning the bride price, Oriana didn't call me. She called Carmen instead, and Carmen quietly handed me the phone. Oriana's voice was nothing like I remembered. It was rough and tired, stripped of the confidence she used to have. She admitted they couldn't come up with the money. I told her that was something she and Jason needed to solve. Suddenly she broke down, asking why I couldn't just let her go because she was already miserable enough. Looking out the apartment window at the parking lot below, I calmly replied that she had it backwards. I wasn't the one refusing to let her go. She was trapped by the choices she had made herself. Then Jason took the phone. Gone was the polished businessman who once smiled with absolute confidence. His voice shook as he asked for a few more days, insisting that once Chan Medical approved his pending contract, he would have the money. I quietly asked him if he really believed Chan Medical was going to approve it. He fell silent. I wished him good luck and ended the call. The very next day, Chan Medical officially rejected his request for an expanded supply agreement because his company's recent financial reports showed too much operational risk. It was a standard business decision with nothing personal behind it, but Jason didn't see it that way. That same day, one of his clients asked if he knew the full name of the Chan family's eldest grandson. Confused, Jason received a link to an industry news article covering Chan Medical's annual conference. In the photo, I was standing on stage beside my father. The moment he recognized me, his phone slipped from his hand and hit the floor. According to Aaron, Jason just crouched there with both hands on his head for nearly 20 minutes while his assistant almost called an ambulance, thinking he was having a heart attack. Aaron joked that I had destroyed Jason's business, pride, and future without saying a single insulting word. I reminded him that Jason had taken someone else's fiancée on his own, built his own problems, and I had simply refused to shield him from the consequences. Not long after, Oriana learned the truth as well. Her mother found out through the family group chat after my own mother proudly shared the news article showing exactly who I really was. One day, my mother shared an article in the family group chat with a simple caption, "My son." Valentina happened to be cooking when she saw it, and I later heard she was so shocked she dropped the spatula straight into the pan. Oriana had just finished a prenatal checkup and was sitting in the back of a taxi when someone forwarded her the screenshot. She stared at the photo in silence. The man standing beside the chairman of Chan Medical in a tailored suit was the same Adrian she thought was just an ordinary surgeon making $20,000 a month, driving a modest car, and living in a small apartment. The only difference was that now she realized she had never really known me at all. She sent me a message accusing me of lying to her, but I never saw it because she was still blocked. The message went through, yet it might as well have disappeared into thin air, just like every promise she had made after choosing someone else. "You've been staring at me for 3 minutes," she said. "I'm thinking about something medical," I replied. "With the way you eat, don't you ever get acid reflux?" She burst into a coughing fit, nearly spraying noodle soup through her nose, then glared at me between laughs. "Can you have one normal conversation?" I handed her a tissue, and as she wiped her eyes, she laughed again, those familiar crescent-shaped eyes making it impossible not to smile. Looking down at my own bowl, I caught my reflection in the broth and sighed to myself. I was in trouble. Somewhere along the way, I had started looking forward to spending time with her. Around the same time, Jason's life was becoming much less comfortable. One of his company's shipments was held up at customs because the import paperwork was incomplete. He scrambled to contact suppliers, begging them to send the missing documents, and one of those suppliers happened to be Chan Medical Group, my family's company. I wasn't responsible for the mistake. One of his employees had genuinely forgotten an important registration number. My father's secretary even messaged me to ask if we should remind Jason about the missing paperwork. I simply replied, "No, I wasn't trying to sabotage him. I just wasn't interested in saving him from problems he had created himself." The shipment sat there for 2 weeks, creating enough financial pressure to throw his business into chaos. Soon after, Oriana stopped posting cheerful maternity photos from Los Angeles. Aaron later told me she had started borrowing money because Jason's cash flow was drying up. He asked if I had done something behind the scenes. I honestly hadn't. Sometimes all it takes is refusing to rescue someone. The following Saturday evening, Carmen called and told me Oriana had invited her to dinner. That immediately caught my attention. Carmen explained that Oriana had asked about me 3 separate times during the call, and she didn't believe the invitation was simply 2 old friends catching up. After thinking about it for a few seconds, I asked if she wanted me to come along. She hesitated before agreeing, admitting she felt safer with me there. We agreed to meet at 7 o'clock at a Western restaurant inside District A Mall. When I arrived, Carmen was already waiting. She smiled and looked me over. "You're dressed pretty formally." I glanced at my plain white shirt and black pants and shrugged. "It's the only shirt I own that isn't wrinkled." 15 minutes later, Oriana walked in. She had lost a noticeable amount of weight, but her pregnancy was much more obvious now. Even under layers of makeup, the dark circles beneath her eyes couldn't be hidden. The moment she saw me, she stopped in her tracks, completely stunned. "Adrian, why are you here?" Before I could answer, Carmen calmly pulled out the chair beside her and said, "I invited him. You don't mind, do you?" Oriana forced a smile that looked carefully practiced and took her seat. "Long time no see, Adrian." I nodded. "The last time we met was before you left the country." The table instantly turned cold. When the waiter arrived, Oriana ordered steak and a salad, Carmen chose pasta, and I asked for nothing except an Americano. Oriana looked at me in surprise. "You're not eating?" I shook my head. "I already ate." The truth was much simpler. Sitting across from her had taken away whatever appetite I had left. Every bite would have tasted like betrayal. Once the food arrived, Oriana casually turned to Carmen and asked where she was working these days. But it was obvious she wasn't really interested in Carmen's answer. She was trying to find another way to get to me. 3 of us sat in silence until Oriana glanced between Carmen and me and casually asked where she worked. When Carmen mentioned Aaron's company, Oriana immediately connected the dots and asked if we were together. Before Carmen could answer, I calmly lifted my coffee cup and said, "We are." The sound of Oriana's knife and fork hitting the plate echoed across the table. She stared at me in disbelief while Carmen turned toward me with wide eyes, surprised but saying nothing to deny it. Oriana's grip tightened around her knife as she demanded to know when we had started dating and accused me of getting close to Carmen just to hurt her. I set my cup down and looked her in the eye. "When you went overseas to have Jason's baby, did you ever stop to remember that I was your fiancé?" Her face lost all color. I told her she had made her choice, and I respected it, but she no longer had any right to question mine. Then I stood up, asked Carmen to leave with me, and walked out, leaving Oriana alone with her untouched dinner. As soon as we stepped into the hallway, Carmen grabbed my sleeve and quietly asked about what I'd said. I apologized for speaking before asking her, then offered to go back and explain if she wanted. She looked at me for a long moment before softly saying she had never planned to deny it. I noticed a little pasta sauce on her fingers, pointed it out, and she immediately blushed while wiping her hand on her skirt, embarrassed that I had focused on something so ordinary in such a serious moment. I smiled and asked, "So, does that mean we're together?" After a brief pause, she gave the quietest imaginable. It was almost lost beneath the hum of the shopping mall's air conditioning, but it was enough. My heart hit my chest like the sharp beep of a hospital monitor, and I knew I was in deeper than I wanted to admit. After that night, everything started moving fast. Jason's shipment eventually cleared customs, but by then 3 major clients had already canceled their orders, costing him nearly $2 million in penalties and lost business. Desperate to recover, he visited Chan Medical Group to request a larger supply quota, hoping bigger orders would make up for his losses. The procurement director, Old Joe, had known me since I was a child. He listened patiently to Jason's presentation for 2 hours before politely saying the proposal would need approval from the Chan family. Jason happily agreed, completely unaware that the Chan family he was trying to impress was actually my family. Oriana's mother, Valentina. Later I learned she had been visiting a friend who worked in the same building. As soon as the elevator doors closed, the 3 of us stood there in awkward silence. Valentina noticed me first. Her face froze. Then she recognized Carmen. Finally, she looked at the tiny distance between us. We were standing less than a foot apart in the crowded elevator. You could practically see her mind racing as she tried to figure out what was happening. It honestly looked like her brain was working so hard it was about to overheat. Valentina looked back and forth between me and Carmen before finally asking, "Adrian, you and this young lady?" Carmen lowered the stack of blueprints just enough to recognize her. "Auntie Valentina." Valentina recognized her immediately too, and her face went through a whole series of emotions in seconds. First came shock, then disbelief, then anger, and finally something that looked a lot like fear. She stared at Carmen and demanded, "You're Oriana's classmate. Why are you with Adrian?" Carmen quickly shook her head. "Auntie, we're not together. I just work in this building." Valentina wasn't listening anymore. She pointed at Carmen and accused her of being the reason Oriana had lost me, even suggesting she had deliberately stolen me away. I almost laughed. It was incredible how she managed to blame someone else when her own daughter had flown overseas, cheated on her fiancé, and gotten pregnant by another man. I calmly interrupted her. "Auntie, first, Carmen and I met here by coincidence. Second, even if we were dating, it would have nothing to do with Oriana because our relationship ended a long time ago." Just then the elevator reached the ground floor and the doors opened. Before stepping out, I turned back and added, "Third, there are 21 days left before the deadline to return the bride price. Please remind your daughter." Then I walked out. As the elevator doors slowly closed, I caught one last glimpse of Valentina standing there with trembling lips, one hand gripping the elevator wall for support. Carmen hurried after me and quietly asked if I thought I had been a little too harsh. I shook my head. "Not at all. I was just collecting a debt." She looked at me for a second, lowered her head, and laughed softly, her shoulders shaking. "You're a really strange person." I smiled. People who get cheated on usually become a little strange. That night Oriana sent me a message on WeChat asking if I was dating Carmen. I replied with nothing but a question mark. She immediately followed with another message saying her mother had seen us together and accusing me of getting close to Carmen just to make her jealous. I typed out several different replies, deleting each one before sending it. In the end, I only wrote 4 simple words. "None of your business." Then I blocked her. I tossed my phone onto the table and leaned back on the sofa. Outside, the streetlights blurred through the evening fog into soft yellow circles. For just a moment, something tightened in my chest. It wasn't because I still loved Oriana. It was because I suddenly realized I had spent 3 years honestly investing myself in a relationship that had never been genuine. It felt less like heartbreak and more like discovering the money you'd been carrying around for years was counterfeit. You don't necessarily feel pain. You just feel cheated. A few days later, Carmen invited me out herself. She was looking for a new apartment and wanted my opinion because, according to her, doctors should know whether a place had good lighting and ventilation. I couldn't help wondering when surgeons had become housing inspectors, but I agreed anyway. The apartment was on the 6th floor of an old building without an elevator. By the time we reached the 4th floor, Carmen was already bent over trying to catch her breath. I smiled and asked if she ever exercised. Between breaths she replied that designers got all their exercise through their wrists. When I asked why she would rent a sixth-floor apartment if climbing stairs exhausted her, she simply answered, "Because it's cheap." Looking at her standing there with damp hair sticking to her face and tiny drops of sweat on the tip of her nose, I quietly took the water bottle and shopping bag from her hands. "Come on," I said. "Only 2 more floors." She looked at me in surprise. "You're not tired?" I shrugged. "I stand in operating rooms for 6 hours at a time. 2 flights of stairs are nothing." She smiled without saying another word and followed me upstairs. The apartment itself was actually pretty decent. It had plenty of natural sunlight, a bathroom window for ventilation, and only one issue. Behind a painting left by the previous tenant, I noticed a crack running across part of the living room wall. I pointed it out and told her it could simply be normal structural settling, but that she should have it checked. She stared at me with genuine curiosity. "How do you even know that?" I laughed. "After cutting through enough human bones, you become good at spotting cracks." She burst into laughter. As we stood by the window, the afternoon sunlight lit up the side of her face and turned her eyelashes golden. I found myself staring for a second. It wasn't exactly love at first sight. It was more like seeing a beautiful photograph before anyone had even picked up the camera. I immediately reminded myself that my last relationship had barely ended and I had no business thinking that way. After we finished looking at the apartment, we stopped at a small noodle shop downstairs. Carmen ordered a large bowl of beef noodles with an extra egg. Watching her eat made me laugh. She had a huge appetite, happily slurping noodles without worrying about appearances until a drop of soup landed on her chin. 3 years into lunch, Carmen had already finished half her pasta while I was still nursing my coffee. She ate with complete abandon, wiping soup from her chin with the back of her hand without the slightest concern for appearances. It was the exact opposite of Oriana, who used to take tiny, careful bites and never opened her mouth too wide in public. Every photo she posted was perfectly filtered and carefully posed. Carmen was more like a steaming bowl of spicy beef noodles, messy, bold, and completely herself. After a few minutes, she caught me watching her and raised an eyebrow, twisted open a bottle of mineral water and said, "His posture while holding her waist is terrible. That's how people end up with lower back problems." Aaron stared at me. "Can you react like a normal person for once?" I shrugged. "Why? Her life has nothing to do with me anymore." Then I took another sip of water before adding, "She still owes me the bride price." That weekend I attended a medical industry forum as one of the hospital's young surgical representatives. While signing in, I noticed a familiar name on the guest list. Jason, CEO of ZH Medical Devices in Los Angeles. Fate clearly had a strange sense of humor. I signed my name and found a quiet seat. During the tea break, I spotted him walking confidently through the crowd in a tailored suit with perfectly styled hair and polished shoes. 2 assistants followed behind him carrying coffee while he scanned the room. The moment he noticed me, his smile disappeared for a split second before returning. He walked over and greeted me politely. "Adrian." I stayed seated and looked up at him. "Mr. Jason." Wearing the kind of smile people save for business meetings, he commented that he had heard I was working as a surgeon and said I seemed to be doing well. I calmly replied, "My hands are still steady enough to hold a scalpel." He sat across from me and awkwardly brought up Oriana, saying he understood the situation was uncomfortable and that love could be complicated. I interrupted him before he finished. "Mr. Jason, did you receive the package?" His smile faltered. "The Hello Kitty pillow?" He nodded stiffly. "Yes, I received it." "Good." I looked him straight in the eye. "Then let's talk about the bride price. $368,000, plus the car worth another $190,000. When can I expect repayment?" I looked Jason straight in the eye and said, "Since you took the person, you should settle the bill too." His confident smile disappeared instantly. "Adrian, what exactly do you mean? Oriana and I truly love each other." I cut him off before he could continue. "I don't care if your love is real or fake. I care about my money." I stood up so we were face to face. He was a little taller than me, but I still noticed him unconsciously take half a step backward. $558,000. 1 month. Thank you. I picked up my teacup, took a sip, and smiled. The tea's pretty good. You should try it. Then I walked away without looking back. Even so, I could still feel his eyes on me. They weren't threatening. They were just irritating, like a pair of dull knives that couldn't actually cut anything. The conference continued as if nothing had happened. Jason later took the stage to present his medical equipment import business. His slides were polished, the financial numbers were impressive, and he proudly talked about his partnerships with 37 hospitals. Then one familiar logo appeared on the screen, Chan Medical Group. He proudly announced that it was his company's most important supplier and described the relationship as a deep strategic partnership. Sitting quietly in the audience, I sipped my tea and almost laughed. He was proudly showing off his biggest business connection without realizing he was standing in front of the grandson of the company's founder. The irony was almost too perfect. After the conference ended, I called my father. Dad, does our company work with ZH Medical Devices in Los Angeles? He answered immediately. Yes, small company, nothing major. Why? I replied casually. Don't do anything to them yet. He paused before asking, You know them? I said, kind of. The owner stole my fiancée. There was about 2 seconds of silence before my father calmly asked, So when do you want me to do something? I smiled. After the baby is born. All right. He hung up without another word. Between father and son, long conversations were rarely necessary. Over the following 2 weeks, I saw Carmen 3 different times. The first time, she actually came all the way to the hospital just to repay the $2 for the umbrella. She walked up to the reception desk and placed 2 coins in front of me. The head nurse stared at the coins, then looked at me with complete confusion. Dr. Adrian, are you secretly running a loan shark business? I shrugged. Umbrella debt. Carmen laughed beside me and explained that she didn't like owing people favors, no matter how small. The head nurse studied her from head to toe before looking back at me with an expression that practically screamed, You definitely made the right choice ending that engagement. The second time we met, she insisted on buying me dinner as thanks for the umbrella. I reminded her that a $2 umbrella wasn't worth an entire meal, but she smiled and said she was paying in advance for any future favors. We ended up eating at a small roadside restaurant where she somehow managed to eat more than I did. During dinner, I asked how she and Oriana had become friends. She explained they had been assigned to the same dorm room during freshman year, with Oriana sleeping in the bunk above hers. When I asked if they had been close, she paused before answering honestly. She was nice to me. She saved seats for me in class, bought me breakfast, and helped me a lot. But looking back, she treated everyone well. Her kindness always had a purpose. She didn't need friends because she liked them. She needed people around her who made her look better. She quietly added that she had never been as pretty, as smart, or as wealthy as Oriana, which was probably why she became the perfect best friend. I slowly put down my chopsticks and asked why she had stayed friends with someone like that for so long. She smiled at herself. Because I'm slow. By the time I figured it out, college was already over. Hearing that made me realize how similar we really were. Some people don't recognize they're being used until everything is already over. The third meeting was memorable for a completely different reason. I had gone to Aaron's company to pick him up for dinner and happened to run into Carmen inside the elevator. She was carrying a stack of blueprints that covered half her face. There was one other passenger inside. I packed it up and mailed it directly to Jason. In the remarks section, I politely wrote, Dear Mr. Jason, this is a personal belonging your wife left behind at her former fiancé's residence. Please kindly receive it. Best wishes. No matter what happened, there was no reason to abandon good manners. Friday night, Aaron insisted I stop hiding at home and dragged me out for dinner. I refused at first, but the second he said he was paying, I grabbed my jacket without another word. Free food is free food. He reserved a private room at a Japanese restaurant, and halfway through ordering he flashed a smug smile. I've got a surprise for you. I looked up from my chopsticks. You set me up on a blind date? He quickly denied it. Not exactly. She's a new designer at my company. She's pretty. She's single. and I thought maybe you should stop spending every night alone with takeout. I shrugged. What's wrong with takeout? At least Ramen doesn't run off to America and get pregnant by another guy. Aaron nearly choked before the private room door slid open. A young woman stepped inside with long hair, a white blouse, and a canvas tote bag hanging from her shoulder. She had barely crossed the doorway when she tripped. The tote flew onto the table, spilling everything across it. Lipstick, keys, pack of tissues, and one unopened condom. The three of us stared at it in complete silence. Her face instantly turned bright red as she scrambled to gather everything together. She tried explaining that it was a company benefit, then changed it to something the pharmacy had given away for free, before giving up entirely. Aaron was shaking from trying not to laugh. Without changing my expression, I picked up the condom and handed it back to her. You should keep better track of that. Dropping it on the floor is bad luck. She looked up at me, and that's when I recognized her. She was Carmen, Oriana's college roommate. The last time I'd seen her was at Oriana's birthday party 2 years earlier, quietly decorating the cake while barely saying a word. She recognized me at almost the same moment. Her face lost every bit of color. You're Oriana's, she began awkwardly. Ex-fiancée. I finished for her. She nodded. Right? Ex-fiancée. The room became so quiet we could hear people singing happy birthday in the next room. Aaron looked from me to Carmen and back again, his expression changing from confusion to horror. Wait, you two know each other? I nodded. She's Oriana's college best friend. Aaron looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. He apologized repeatedly, insisting he had no idea they knew each other. Carmen finished collecting her things, sat down anyway, and calmly said, I heard about what happened with Oriana. Her voice was much softer than I remembered. What she did was wrong. I casually picked up a slice of salmon. You don't have to apologize for her. She shook her head. I wasn't planning to. Then she looked directly into my eyes and said without hesitation, I just think she's stupid. My chopsticks nearly dropped the salmon, while Aaron sprayed beer across the table trying not to laugh. Dinner stretched on for nearly 2 hours, and by the end of it I realized Carmen was nothing like I had expected. She worked in interior design and was doing an internship at Aaron's company. She spoke softly and never raised her voice, but every comment landed with surprising accuracy. She wasn't mean. She was more like a cactus, a little sharp, but somehow still appealing. While absent-mindedly mixing wasabi with her chopsticks, she told me that back in college Oriana talked about Jason all the time. It was always Jason this, Jason that. Even then I felt like the way she treated you wasn't really how someone treats a boyfriend. I looked at her. Then how did she treat me? Carmen smiled slightly. Like a stable investment fund. Reliable whenever she needed you. And when she didn't, she just left you there collecting interest. I laughed. That's an oddly specific comparison. She shrugged. I lost money trading stocks once. You learn a lot. Aaron laughed so hard beside us that he almost knocked over his drink, staring at us like he couldn't believe how naturally we were talking. When dinner finally ended, it was pouring outside. Carmen hadn't brought an umbrella, so I walked over to the shared umbrella stand near the restaurant entrance, dropped in 2 coins, and handed one to her. She smiled and thanked me. You're welcome, I replied. You owe me $2 next time. She paused for a second before laughing, a real laugh that reached her eyes and showed her front teeth. The rain pounded against the awning while she opened the umbrella and started walking away. After a few steps, she turned back. Adrian. Yeah. She smiled again. You're a lot more interesting than Oriana always said. She used to tell everyone you were boring. I slipped my hands into my pockets. Maybe boring men are just the ones who get cheated on. She didn't answer. She simply waved and disappeared into the rain, her canvas bag swinging gently by her side. I stood there watching until Aaron nudged me with his elbow. So, what do you think? About what? About Carmen. I looked in the direction she had disappeared. She still owes me $2. Aaron rolled his eyes. I'm asking if you're interested in her. I kept staring into the rainy street where only her blurry silhouette remained. Help me find out if she has a boyfriend. Aaron looked at me with the satisfied expression of someone whose prediction had just come true. A few days later, he called with another update. Jason had brought Oriana back to the country, and the two of them had officially announced their relationship on WeChat Moments with a professional maternity photo shoot they had taken in Los Angeles. I opened the screenshots Aaron sent me. Oriana stood beneath palm trees wearing a flowing white dress, while Jason wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her head. The filters were so heavy they barely looked real, and the caption read, "The best time of our lives." The comments were full of congratulations, but I noticed something else. Oriana had blocked me from seeing the post. Honestly, that saved me the trouble of pretending to congratulate them. Aaron asked how I felt after seeing the pictures. I locked my phone. Looking back, those 3 years together really did feel unopened. The next morning, I reported to work as usual for my emergency surgery shift. I had barely changed into my white coat when the head nurse walked over and told me someone was waiting to see me. I looked down the hallway and saw Oriana's father, Leonardo, standing there in a gray jacket with a bag of fruit in his hand. His expression looked like a mix between someone attending a funeral and someone regretting every decision they'd ever made. I silently figured the family had finally sent in their negotiator. I greeted him, asked the head nurse for 5 minutes, and followed him into the stairwell. He held the fruit toward me, but I didn't accept it. He awkwardly shifted the bag between his hands before finally speaking. He admitted right away that what had happened was Oriana's fault. Hearing that almost surprised me. Apparently Valentina's story about mysterious coworkers had already fallen apart inside the family. Then he sighed and said young people make mistakes, asking me to let him handle everything. He promised he would make Oriana end things with Jason so she and I could continue our relationship. I stopped him before he could finish. "Uncle, your daughter is 14 weeks pregnant with another man's child. Continue what exactly? You want me to raise someone else's baby?" He opened his mouth but couldn't find any words. Sweat slowly formed on his forehead while the stairwell filled with the smell of disinfectant mixed with the sweet scent of the fruit he had brought. A breeze drifted through the half-open window. I looked at him and said calmly, "You're a father, so I understand why you're trying to protect your daughter. But I'm not a fool." I took an envelope from my pocket and handed it toward him. Inside were every receipt and every transfer record for the bride price of $368,000, along with the car worth another $190,000. Just return what was originally given. Nothing more. Leonardo stared at the envelope as though it were a court judgment. He couldn't even bring himself to take it. I placed it beside the fruit bag and told him there was no rush as long as everything was settled within a month. Then I turned to leave because patients were waiting for me. Just before I reached the door, he quietly asked if I truly didn't care about everything we had shared in the past. I stopped and looked back at him. The past belongs to two people. The moment your daughter stopped caring about it, she never asked me first. I walked away without another word. Behind me, the fruit bag slipped off the windowsill and apples rolled across the stairwell floor. Leonardo bent down to pick them up alone. I didn't help him. Around noon, I was eating lunch in the hospital cafeteria when Aaron messaged me. He had done some digging on Jason and sounded excited. Jason owned a medical equipment import company in Los Angeles, and according to Aaron, his biggest supplier was Chan Medical Group. I quietly chewed my rice. Chan Medical Group happened to be my family's company. My grandfather founded it, my father now managed it, and I was already listed as the first successor in the family trust. Oriana had never known any of that. As far as she was concerned, I was just an ordinary surgeon making a little over $20,000 a month, driving an inexpensive car, and living in a modest apartment near the hospital. She never knew I drove that cheap car because I refused to waste money on expensive parking at work. She never knew my family owned the entire office building beneath my apartment. And she definitely never knew that Jason, the man she chose over me, had to politely deal with my father's purchasing managers every month just to keep his business supplied. Aaron flooded the chat with laughing emojis before asking if I wanted to crush Jason with a single phone call because, according to him, it would be that easy. I quietly set down my chopsticks and thought about it. I thought about Aaron's suggestion for a moment before replying, No rush. There was no reason to destroy Jason overnight. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone enjoy the life they fought so hard to steal before reality catches up with them. I wanted him to have his happy ending first. Let the baby be born. Then I'd let him discover exactly whose family signed the checks that kept his business alive. Around 3 that afternoon, Oriana called again. This time I answered. Her voice was much calmer than it had been the day before. It sounded carefully rehearsed, soft in a way that felt more practiced than sincere. Adrian, I know you're angry, but can you give me one chance? I want to explain everything in person. I leaned back in my chair. Explain what? After a short pause, she quietly replied, explain us. I couldn't help smiling, though there wasn't any warmth behind it. There isn't an us anymore. Her voice immediately became more emotional. Can't you at least hear me out? What happened with Jason? It was just an accident. I nodded to myself. Getting accidentally pregnant for 14 weeks is pretty impressive. She started to protest, but I stopped her. Before you left for America, I asked you to travel with me. You said you were too busy. I invited you to dinner. You were too busy again. During the 3 months you were away, you called me exactly 4 times, and none of those calls lasted more than 3 minutes. The silence on the other end said more than any excuse she could have made. I looked out the office window before quietly saying, now I know what you were really busy doing. She softly called my name again, but I had already made my decision. Your father knows about returning the bride price. Go be happy with Jason. I'm not stopping you. Then I ended the call, opened my food delivery app, and decided barbecue pork over rice sounded like a good dinner. On my way home that evening, I passed the package lockers outside my apartment building and suddenly remembered the Hello Kitty pillow she had left behind. 3 years into our engagement, my fiancée, Oriana, told me she was leaving for the United States to continue her studies. I believed every word she said. I trusted her completely. That trust lasted until my future mother-in-law accidentally dropped a bomb in our family group chat. My phone buzzed with a new message from Valentina. Thinking it was just another one of her usual health tips or motivational pictures, I opened it without a second thought. Instead, I found myself staring at an ultrasound report. At the top of the image were the names Mr. Jason and Ms. Oriana. Below them was another line that hit even harder. 14 weeks pregnant. Fetus developing well. I stared at the screen, read it again, and then one more time. 14 weeks. Oriana had only been in America for 3 months. The timeline lined up so perfectly it almost felt like someone had solved the math for me. Within seconds, the family group chat exploded. Her father filled the chat with question marks. My mother did the same. Valentina desperately tried deleting the image over and over, but it was already too late because someone had taken a screenshot. Then she quickly typed that it was the wrong picture and claimed it belonged to one of her coworkers. What an incredible coincidence. Apparently her coworker had the exact same name as her daughter. I quietly placed my phone face down on the table, took a deep breath, opened my food delivery app, and ordered a bowl of ramen with double beef. When your life falls apart, the first thing you should do is eat. That has always been my philosophy. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. My mother called 3 times and I declined every call. The 4th call came from Oriana. Her contact name still said wife with a little heart beside it. That definitely needed to change. For a second I wondered if I should rename her Jason's wife, or maybe former investment. I answered anyway. Her voice was shaky, almost like she had been crying. She immediately started explaining that the ultrasound was fake, that someone had photoshopped it, that her mother's phone had been hacked, and that someone was trying to ruin her reputation. I switched the call to speaker, calmly peeled an orange, and responded with nothing more than a quiet, She begged me to believe her and reminded me that she was in America studying. I answered with another Frustrated, she asked if I could say anything else. I bit into an orange slice before asking the only question that mattered. Who's Jason? Silence. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Finally she stammered that the hospital had mixed up the names. I quietly interrupted her. Which hospital in Los Angeles? I can have someone verify it. If they really made a mistake, we'll file a complaint. She had no answer. The silence stretched on until she finally admitted the situation was complicated and asked me to wait until she came home so we could talk face to face. I squeezed the orange peel in my hand until the bitter citrus scent filled the room. "There's no need," I said. Confused, she asked what I meant. I walked over to the window. Down below, an old man was walking his corgi, and every few steps the little dog dramatically flopped onto the sidewalk. Honestly, I understood exactly how it felt. I looked outside and calmly said, "The wedding is off. As for the bride price, $368,000, and the car, tell Jason to reimburse me in full." Before she could respond, I ended the call. Then I changed her contact name to former business partner, investment withdrawn. A few minutes later, my ramen arrived. As I unpacked it near the front door, my best friend Aaron called. Apparently, screenshots from the family chat had already spread everywhere. He sounded completely shocked and asked if I was okay, offering to let me cry on his shoulder if I needed to. I told him I was busy eating ramen and asked if he wanted some because I had ordered extra beef. There was a long pause before he asked if I had completely lost my mind. I stuffed a huge bite of noodles into my mouth and shrugged. "No, I just don't think a woman who flew overseas to have another man's baby is worth starving over." Aaron went quiet again before asking what I planned to do next. I swallowed my food and answered as if I were discussing tomorrow's grocery list. "First, I'm finishing this meal. Then I'm packing up everything she left at my place and shipping it back to her. Cash on delivery." Even Aaron admitted that was cold. After I finished eating, I started gathering Oriana's belongings. 3 pairs of slippers, 1.5 bottles of shampoo, a Hello Kitty pillow, and finally the framed photo sitting on my nightstand. In the picture, she smiled as sweetly as ever, looking like the woman I thought I knew. I stared at it for a couple of seconds before quietly turning the frame face down. It wasn't because I couldn't bear to look at it. I simply found it annoying. When I turned the photo frame over, I noticed a small line printed on the back that read, "For product quality issues, please contact customer service." I couldn't help laughing to myself. Even the frame seemed to be telling me this relationship qualified for a return. I kept packing Oriana's things into a cardboard box when my phone rang again. It was her mother, Valentina. The moment I answered, she nervously said, "Adrian, things aren't what you think." I calmly replied, "Auntie, can you remind me which coworker of yours was named Oriana? I've been thinking about it for a while, but I can't remember you ever mentioning one." She immediately fell silent. After a few awkward seconds, I said, "I'm not trying to make things difficult for you. Whatever happened between Oriana and me ends here. As for the bride price, please discuss it with Uncle. I'm not in a hurry. You have 1 month." She tried to stop me and asked me to listen, but I simply apologized, told her I had surgery preparations to do, and ended the call. I sealed the box, filled out the shipping label with Oriana's home address, and in the remarks section I wrote, "Brand new, unopened."